welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at the all-new STL ToneHub update. So I feel like the arms race that is digitizing your rig has hit something of a fever pitch here in 2024. Between hardware solutions and software solutions, we just have so many different ways of creating all-in-one rigs just in software in your computer or in a floor controller or a rack piece of gear or whatever. And the ability to not just use other people's, like other companies' sounds, but also to be able to kind of get your sounds, your favorite drives, your personal amplifier that you love into those rigs is better and more effective than it's ever been. And I think that's what makes this update from STL's ToneHub such a big deal. ToneHub, if you have not used it before, is a digital rig system for your computer that basically in years past has given you access to great amp models and rig models from STL's like own internal design of effects and everything, but also presets from some of your favorite artists, producers, and guitar players. I personally started using STL ToneHub about 2 years ago or so when Bo Burchell from Seosin released his pack for it, and that was kind of what piqued my interest and got me using it. But this new update brings the tracer technology that STL has to ToneHub, basically allowing you to capture not just overdrives or your amplifier, but entire rigs of non-time-based effects, worth noting that right there, into that program. And it's not just overdrives and amplifiers. You can capture your fuzz pedals, which not all companies can do. And the flexibility that this new ToneHub offers has actually been really impressive to me. Not only does it have a bunch of really good sounding drives in front of the amp models they've got, and a bunch of great time-based kind of like modulation, delay, and reverb effects in the post channel, but also the ability to kind of slot in individual traces of overdrives of your own collection into this rig is really nice. It basically gives you two different ways of approaching this process. You can capture individual drives and your amplifier separately from one another and then kind of independently turn them on and off, or you could plug your favorite drive dialed just right so it hits the front of the amp the exact way that you want it to, and basically have that captured as one packaged file, which is really cool. I think dialing amps, especially when you have a genre or a sound that you really kind of feel like you know well, dialing amps and dialing effects is such a personal experience, and more often than not, I find that grabbing other people's clean and low to mid gain drives and amp tones in a program like this or any other company tends to leave something to be desired from me, because I have very specific tendencies when it comes to setting this kind of stuff up. So for that intro jam, during the outro, during that like big kind of like heavy section, none of that are my amplifiers. Those are the Bo Burchell sample pack from STL ToneHub, and they're great. All of the clean stuff going up into that and all of the kind of like low to mid gain stuff is all my Matchless Chieftain that I have here in the studio, traced into ToneHub with the 1981 Inventions LVL low gain overdrive also traced separately and running into the front of my model of my Matchless. And to STL's credit, once you've traced some gear, you still have a lot of control over it and a bunch of really cool kind of ways to fine-tune your capture of your device to make sure that it sounds as close to the real thing as possible. So what we're gonna do now is take a look at that tracing process. I'm gonna show you how I went about capturing my Matchless, how I went about capturing that LVL, and what they sound like and how it stacks up to the real thing. So let's just get into it. So the process for creating a trace is essentially a reamping process. STL has a wave file they provide that you basically play through a piece of gear as the kind of like process of capturing it. So it is very much a reamping setup in your DAW. We are using Luna, and what you basically do is find the ToneHub tracer wave file, put it in your DAW, set the output to your kind of like reamping setup. For me, it's the patch bay right below my Apollo interface. That's going to go into my Walrus Canvas reamp box into the front of the Matchless. The Matchless is going to take the speaker out into my Universal Audio aux box right here, which basically allows me to capture the amp itself, as well as the kind of cabinet that I'm using in the aux software with whatever mic combination I want. Capture all of that, and then basically it'll play back through that amplifier into a new track in my DAW. We'll export that WAV file and then load it into the kind of like tracer workflow in ToneHub. So now that we have everything wired up for our reamp, we are in ToneHub. We have pulled up the kind of like tracer tab right here. We're going to select amp and cabinet. What it's going to have you do is essentially move forward from there, hit locate. As you can see, it says they want you to take this kind of tracer tone wave file, which is going to be the thing used to kind of model the piece of gear or trace the piece of gear that we are going to be capturing. And in this case, it's going to be this Matchless right here. So we've located the file. It's right here. We're going to drop it into my DAW. We're using Universal Audio's Luna right here. And then what I'm going to do here is get rid of these things that sometimes like automatically drop onto my new tracks in Luna. We're going to set our output target to line output number 1. So out of the patch bay, this guy right here is going to run to our reamp box and into the amplifier. And then we're going to go in, whoops. And then we're going to go in, we're going to create a stereo return track, no tape emulation, no channel strip for now. We're going to call it Matchless, bad typing, trace, stereo audio file. Input target from that is going to be the SPDIF, which is our return send over optical for our aux box, which is handling the cabinet side of this. Record enable. We're not going to gain anything up or add any record effects because we want to be able to kind of like do any potential post-processing after the fact. And now all we have to do is record. And we have survived. So now we have that original one and we have the kind of like new version, which is the reamped version. The value here is we now have the option of either exporting this by itself, or if you want to, you can get in and add some post-processing. Like if you want to put like, you know, a little bit of grit with a 1073 gaining it up, or adding a little bit of compression with like a revision E1176 or something. So you could do stuff if you wanted to kind of like add some additional post-processing. We are not actually going to do any of that. Instead, we are just going to take this, trim up the back side of that just a hair, and then process it out. You may notice that I didn't solo the Matchless trace sound with that tracer tone at the front, but that's not necessary because that tracer tone is still set to output to our line level, which means it's just going to the amplifier and not doing anything. So that audio file did not come into play there. We are now jumping back over to ToneHub. We're going to import that tracer test wave file we just created. And then we're going to go default because obviously you can do advanced tracking, which will take longer for high gain and fuzz sounds. But under the circumstances, we are operating in a kind of like a low to mid gain area for the Matchless sound right now. So we're just going to hit start tracing. And once again, we're going to fast forward and let this kind of do its thing. While this happens, I'm going to go ahead and grab a guitar and an instrument cable to plug into my high Z input so that we can hear this trace when we're done. Tracing is complete. Let's jump to proceed and get to the configuration page. So this is kind of the first blush sound of this Matchless setup. Gain that input down a little bit. And now you have some options. You can kind of make changes to it at the outset right here. Do things like if you want to gain it down a little bit as a like bass line. That sounds pretty good. Might dial that bass down just a hair as kind of a bass line. Give it a hair of presence. I like having that master pushing a little bit harder. And then, of course, there are a bunch of tone stacks that you can pull from by default. If you're kind of modeling something that's more common in the industry and everything, Bogners, Ampegs, Mesas, Fenders, Voxes, that kind of thing, you have some presets in there. We're not going to use any of those because that's not what this amp is, and a Matchless is not super similar to any of that stuff, especially not a Chieftain. But what I like is, because at the end of the day, all this stuff is basically just EQ curves and impulse responses. You can also still mess with your cabinet, which is really nice. And you can hear like those big changes if you move it far away. Do the very necessary work of high passing up above 120 hertz. There we go. That's obviously that bridge is going to loop. Cool. And let's call it good there. Proceed. And now you name it. So we're going to call this Match V3 because this is the third time I've done this. Drop it into amps. It is a guitar. I'm going to call it low gain. Matchless Chieftain V3. And then down here we go, you know, just all the labeling, Matchless Chieftain. In this setup, we are using the UA Black GB30. Our microphones, if memory serves, are a 420 or a 414 and a 421. We have no room mics on right now. Let's save it. Continue. And so, yeah, as you can see, oh, we're back in the Boberchell sound. That's what that is. And okay. And then from there, you can go in, give yourself some vibe, some chorus, some delay, and some very big, lush reverb. And now you've got let's get that shimmer out of there. Cut some of that low end in the reverb. Go to our amplifier. You can kind of make whatever changes you want. Let's get closer to the cone again, but still keep some of that space. And so as you can see, we now have 3 spots for tracer overdrives. So let's go ahead and look at putting some of our favorite drives from here in the studio into this as well. So now that we have that Matchless captured in ToneHub, let's go ahead and bring some of our own overdrives into it. Obviously, there's a good wealth of selection available already in here, as well as all of the kind of like various artist presets and everything else. But I am a really big fan of the drives that I'm a big fan of, as I'm sure is the case for you. Everyone's got their favorite take on an 808 or their favorite take on a low gainer, that kind of thing. For me, I really love the 1981 Inventions LVL. I think this is a great low gain overdrive. And so we are going to wire this up and capture this as well. The reamping process for a stomp box is going to be a lot simpler than the amp system is. All we have to do is run out of the output from our DAW into our reamp pedal, out to the pedal itself, and then straight back into the system and run the tracer profile again. So we've run through the process and loaded my LVL with settings both at about 1230 like I have on the actual pedal right here into ToneHub using the tracer system. Let's go ahead and for this kind of like final section of the video, A/B the actual stomp box running directly into the system and the LVL. So the signal chain here is basically just my Music Man into the LVL, into the input on my DAW, and we can basically activate and bypass this in chain with activating and bypassing the tracer version of it. So here is both versions bypassed. Here is the real thing. And here is my trace. The nice thing about these tracers is you always have this little 3-band right here, as well as volume and gain controls up top. So we can kind of fine tune to try to get it as close to possible to the original. So I've just finished editing all of the sound samples and mixing the song from the intro track and everything, and I want to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, which is come back around at the end of the edit and kind of wrap up with a couple quick thoughts. STL ToneHub has always been a really cool tool in my opinion in terms of being able to get great sounds from producers and guitar players that you know and look up to and emulate into your rig, but this new update's ability to get your gear into that workflow as well is really, really cool. I've been really impressed by how good everything sounds, even if it doesn't sound exactly the same. Like, I found that the Matchless came in, gained up a little bit, the LVL came in, gained down a little bit, the flexibility of the tool itself allows you to not only get those things as close as possible to their kind of real life counterparts, but also, even if it doesn't sound exactly the same, I have been noticing that it still just sounds really good in ways that has really impressed me. So if you haven't checked out STL's ToneHub plugin application, I highly recommend it. If you have, check out the update. It's worth your time. I think it's a really good, very flexible option. The bass tones are great, as we heard on that intro track. The guitar tones, both in the box and the ones you can put in, are also excellent. So yeah, I recommend checking it out. Until next time, thanks for watching.